A 2,600-year-old prophecy named the exact nation that would lead an attack against Israel in the last days. It named Persia. Today we call it Iran. And right now, as you watch this, those two nations are at war. That is not the only one. A prophet sealed a book and said it would not be understood until an age when people raced across the whole earth and knowledge exploded beyond all measure. You are living in that age. Another writer described a world where no one could buy or sell anything without permission from a single system, a thing that was pure fantasy for 1,900 years and that we finished building in the last few decades. I am not going to give you a date. Jesus said no one knows the day or the hour, and anyone who claims to have calculated it is lying to you. But Jesus also said something almost no one quotes. He looked at the religious experts of his day and told them they could read the weather in the sky, but they could not read the signs of the times sitting right in front of them. He expected his people to be awake, to recognize the moment they were living in. So here is the honest question this video is going to ask. Not what year is it going to happen, but this: how many of the specific things Jesus and the prophets told us to watch for are visible right now, in this exact moment of history? Because when you actually line them up, the answer is unsettling. Let me show you, and let me be careful and honest with you the whole way through. There is a moment in the Gospel of Matthew when the disciples come to Jesus privately. They sit with him on the Mount of Olives, looking out over Jerusalem, and they ask, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus does not deflect. He does not tell them it is none of their business. He gives them a list, a specific, detailed list of things to watch for. Wars and rumours of wars, nation rising against nation, famines, earthquakes in various places. And then he says something that should stop every reader cold. All these are the beginning of sorrows. The beginning, not the end, the beginning. For 2,000 years, believers have read that list and looked at their own moment in history and wondered, is this it? Are we the generation? And almost every generation has had reasons to think so. The fall of Rome, the Black Death, the world wars. People in every century have looked at their own chaos and seen the signs. That is exactly why honesty matters here. I am not here to add to the noise or to frighten you into clicking. I am here to look at the actual text and the actual world, side by side, and let you see for yourself. So, that is what we are going to do. We are going to take the specific signs Jesus and the prophets described, and we're going to look honestly at the world as it actually is right now, in this moment, and ask how many of these patterns are visible, and what should that mean for how we live? Let us start where Jesus started, with wars. In the Olivet Discourse recorded in Matthew chapter 24, Mark chapter 13, and Luke chapter 21, Jesus says in Matthew 24 verses 6 and 7, "And you will hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that you are not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." Now here is what most people miss about this passage. Jesus is not simply saying there will be war. There has always been war. What he describes is a specific intensification. The phrase nation will rise against nation in the Greek is ethnos epi ethnos, and the word ethnos does not just mean a country. It is where we get the word ethnic. It refers to peoples, ethnic groups, tribes in conflict. Jesus is describing a world fracturing along the lines of peoples and identities, not just states declaring war on states. And when you look at the present moment, the Middle East has become exactly the kind of multi-front, multi-people conflict zone that this language evokes. Israel, Iran, Lebanon, the surrounding nations, layered alliances and proxy forces drawn into escalating conflict that has pulled in more than a dozen countries. Whatever you believe about the politics of it, the geographic centre of biblical prophecy, the land of Israel and the nations immediately surrounding it, is once again the epicentre of global tension. And that detail matters more than people realise, because almost all of biblical end times prophecy is geographically anchored to that exact region. This is where the prophet Ezekiel becomes impossible to ignore. In Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, written roughly 2,600 years ago, the prophet describes a coalition of nations that comes against Israel in the latter days. He names them using their ancient names: Persia, which is modern Iran. Kush and Put, regions of North Africa. Gomer and Togarmah, peoples to the north of Israel, in the region of modern Turkey. Ezekiel says in chapter 38, verse 8, "After many days you will be visited. In the latter years you will come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many people on the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate." Read that phrase again. The land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many people. Ezekiel is describing a nation of Israel that does not exist when he writes. Israel will be conquered, scattered, and erased from the map for centuries. And yet Ezekiel says that in the latter years, this coalition comes against a regathered Israel, a people brought back and gathered from many nations onto mountains that had long been desolate. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. For nearly 1,900 years, there was no nation of Israel. It was a historical impossibility, a scattered people with no homeland. And then in 1948, against every reasonable expectation, the nation of Israel was re-established. The land that had long been desolate began to be gathered. A people brought back from many nations. The single precondition for Ezekiel's prophecy, a regathered Israel, came into existence within living memory. You do not have to be a prophecy expert to feel the weight of that. A 2,600-year-old text describes a regathered Israel, surrounded by a specific coalition of hostile nations led by Persia. And in our era, Israel exists again, and the nation most openly arrayed against it is Iran, which is the heartland of ancient Persia. I want to pause here and be honest with you again, because integrity matters more than views. Faithful Christians disagree about the timing and the interpretation of Ezekiel 38. Some believe it has already been partially fulfilled. Some believe it is yet future. The point I am making is a narrower and, I think, undeniable. The basic stage that this prophecy requires, a regathered Israel surrounded by these specific peoples in conflict, is the stage that actually exists right now. And that was not true for almost 1,900 years. If this is making you look at the Bible differently, take a second and share this video with someone who would find it fascinating. Subscribe so you do not miss the next study. That is genuinely how more people find this kind of content. Now let us go back to Jesus' list because wars were only the first item. He continues in Matthew 24 verse 7. "And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places." 3 signs. Famine. Pestilence, which means disease and plague, and earthquakes in various places. The Greek phrase for "in various places" is kata topos. It carries the sense of scattered, here and there, in place after place. Jesus is not describing one localized disaster. He is describing a pattern of disruption, breaking out across many regions at once. And again, what is striking is not that any single one of these has happened. It is the convergence. Disease outbreaks that became global within weeks. Food insecurity intensifying across multiple regions, hit by both conflict and climate disruption. Seismic activity that the modern world tracks in real time, with major earthquakes striking region after region. Now, a skeptic will say correctly that earthquakes have always happened, and that we simply have better instruments to detect them now. And that is a fair point. But notice the specific word Jesus uses just 2 verses later. In Matthew 24 verse 8 he says, "All these are the beginning of sorrows." The word translated sorrows is the Greek word odin, and odin does not mean general sadness. It is the specific word for the labour pains of a woman giving birth. This is one of the most important keys to understanding all of end times prophecy, and most people read right past it. Jesus compares the signs of the end to contractions. And what is the defining characteristic of labour contractions? They increase, in frequency and in intensity. They start far apart and mild, and they accelerate as the moment of birth approaches. They get closer together. They get stronger. So Jesus is not saying, watch for wars and earthquakes. He is saying something far more sophisticated. He is saying, watch for the rate of these things to accelerate, the way contractions accelerate before a birth. The sign is not the individual event. The sign is the acceleration, the pattern speeding up, the signs clustering closer and closer together. And that reframes the entire question. The question is not, is there war? There has always been war. The question is the labour accelerating? Are the contractions getting closer together? And that is a pattern you can actually observe across a lifetime, across decades, across the compression of crisis after crisis, with less and less space between them. This brings us to one of the most specific prophecies in the entire Bible, found in the book of Daniel. Daniel was a Hebrew exile in Babylon, serving in the courts of the most powerful empire on earth, roughly 600 years before Christ. And near the end of his book, an angelic messenger gives Daniel a prophecy and then says something extraordinary. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, the messenger says, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Seal the book until the time of the end." Daniel is told that his prophecy will not be fully understood until a specific era. An era marked by two signs. First, that many shall run to and fro, and second, that knowledge shall increase. For most of human history, these two phrases made very little sense. People did not run to and fro. The vast majority of human beings lived and died within a few miles of where they were born. Travel was slow, dangerous, and rare, and knowledge increased at a crawl, passed down slowly through generations, lost in fires and conquests. And then, within the span of about a single century, both of those things changed more than they had in all of prior human history combined. Human beings now run to and fro across the entire planet, by car, by train, by airplane, crossing oceans in hours. And knowledge has not merely increased, it has exploded beyond all comprehension, doubling and redoubling, carried in devices most of us hold in our hands, connecting nearly every person on Earth to the sum of human information. The Hebrew phrase translated run to and fro is shut, and it carries the sense of rapid movement back and forth, racing here and there. And the phrase knowledge shall increase uses the word dath, knowledge, with rabba, to multiply, to become great. A 2,500-year-old text said the sealed prophecy would be opened in an age of global travel and multiplying knowledge. And whatever else you believe, you are living in the first era in human history where both of those descriptions are simply, obviously true. Let me give you one more, and this one is the most sobering, because it describes something that was technologically impossible until our exact generation. In the book of Revelation, the Apostle John, exiled on the island of Patmos near the end of the 1st century, describes the rise of a global economic system in the last days. In Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 and 17, he writes, "He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark." Set aside for a moment the speculation about what the mark itself is. Focus on the mechanism John describes. He describes a single, centralized system that controls all buying and selling, a system through which no one, anywhere, can engage in commerce without authorization. Every transaction, gated, every purchase, dependent on permission. For 1,900 years, this was simply not possible. Commerce was physical. Coins, barter, paper, handed person to person, untrackable and uncontrollable from any central point. The idea of a single system that could switch off any individual's ability to buy or sell anything was pure fantasy. There was no mechanism on Earth that could do it. And now there is. We have, within just the last few decades, built the first cashless infrastructure in human history. Digital payments, centralized financial networks, the technical capacity for systems that can authorize or deny any transaction for any person in real time. I'm not telling you any particular technology is the mark. I'm telling you something narrower and more unsettling. The mechanism John described, the thing that was impossible for 1,900 years, the infrastructure required for his prophecy to even be possible, has been built in our lifetime. That is the pattern across all of these prophecies. It is not that any one of them proves anything by itself. It is that the preconditions for so many of them, the stage that each one requires to even be possible, have all come into existence in the same compressed window of history. A regathered Israel, global travel, exploding knowledge, cashless commerce, the geographic flashpoint of prophecy becoming the centre of world conflict, the contractions getting closer together. If this study is feeding you, take a moment to subscribe and leave a comment. Even a single word helps this reach others who are asking the same questions. We read everyone. So what does all of this mean for you right now, today? First, it means you should be a careful reader, not a fearful one. Notice what Jesus said right in the middle of his list of signs. See that you are not troubled. He gave the signs precisely so his people would not panic when they saw them. The signs are not meant to terrify you. They are meant to orient you. A woman in labour is not surprised by her contractions. She was told to expect them. They tell her where she is in the process. Jesus gave us the contractions so we would not be caught off guard, not so we would live in dread. Second, resist the two opposite errors, because both of them are traps. The first error is date setting, taking these patterns and forcing them into a calculated year, which Jesus explicitly forbade and which has made fools of well-meaning people for centuries. The second error is the opposite, the scoffing dismissal that says nothing is ever different, that every generation thought this, so it means nothing. Peter actually predicted that exact attitude. In 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 4, he wrote that in the last days scoffers would come saying, "Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue, as they were from the beginning." The mature position is between those two errors, watchful but not panicked, awake but not date-setting. And maybe the part that stays with me most is this. The entire point of every one of these prophecies, the reason Jesus gave them at all, was not so we could decode a timeline. It was so we would live ready. When Jesus finished his list of signs, he did not say, now go calculate the date. He told a series of parables about servants who stay faithful while the master is away, about lamps kept burning, about being found doing what you were given to do whenever he returns. The signs were never an end in themselves. They were a wake-up call to live today, the way you would want to be living if you knew he was coming tomorrow. Because here is the truth that cuts through all the speculation. For you personally, the end of the age and the end of your own life are equally certain and equally unknown in their timing. None of us is promised tomorrow. The call to be ready is not really a call to watch the news with a prophecy chart. It is a call to make sure that whenever your moment comes, whether it is the return of Christ or simply the end of your own road, you are found awake, found faithful, found in his hands. The signs are accelerating. The contractions are getting closer together. But the message underneath them all is not fear. It is the oldest invitation in the Bible, made newly urgent. Be ready. Come home. The door is still open. If this opened your eyes to something, help us reach someone else with it. Subscribe, leave a comment, share it with someone who is watching the world and wondering. Pray for us. God bless you.